Imagine the Japanese government offering your family millions of yen to move away from Tokyo. Not to move into Tokyo. To leave it. For an eligible household, Japan's Regional Relocation Support Program can provide up to 1 million yen for the household, plus up to 1 million yen for each accompanying child under 18, depending on the local program and eligibility requirements. A family with 2 eligible children could potentially receive as much as 3 million yen in relocation support. Sounds like an easy decision. Pack the boxes. Take the money. Move somewhere cheaper. Except there's a problem. Tokyo is still one of the places people most want to move to. So Japan is doing something that sounds almost backwards. It's paying some people to leave a city that keeps attracting people. And that raises a much stranger question. Why? Tokyo has something that is incredibly difficult for another city to manufacture. Opportunity. A young person graduating from university can find companies, industries, universities, professional networks, restaurants, entertainment, transportation, and thousands of other people looking for the same things. If you're 28 and trying to build a career, moving to Tokyo doesn't necessarily feel like abandoning your hometown. It can feel like the rational thing to do. In 2025, Tokyo recorded a net inflow of more than 65,000 people from elsewhere in Japan. The broader Tokyo metropolitan area gained more than 123,000. So Tokyo is still attracting people. And that creates the central paradox. The government wants some people to leave. But the economy keeps giving people reasons to arrive. Tokyo isn't necessarily telling people to come. Companies do. Universities do. Career opportunities do. And people follow those incentives. Let's imagine someone named Kenji. Kenji isn't desperate. He isn't running away from poverty. He's simply looking for a better career. A company in Tokyo offers him a job. His friends are there. The city has more employers if his first job doesn't work out. And if he eventually changes industries, there are more opportunities nearby. So Kenji moves. And from his perspective, the decision makes perfect economic sense. He's not thinking about Japan's demographic problem. He's thinking about his future. That's important. Because when thousands of people make individually rational decisions, they can create a collective problem. Kenji isn't trying to weaken his hometown. He's simply trying to improve his own life. But when thousands of people make the same decision, something much bigger happens. They take their labor with them. Their income. Their future spending. Their future taxes. And potentially, one day, their future families. That's where the story gets interesting. Imagine Kenji's first paycheck. Some of it goes toward rent. Some goes to groceries. Some goes to restaurants. Some pays for transportation. Some goes toward entertainment. Some becomes taxes. And all of those transactions help support an economic ecosystem. One worker doesn't make a city. But multiply Kenji by thousands. Then tens of thousands. Suddenly, population isn't just a demographic statistic. It's economic infrastructure. A person is simultaneously a worker, a customer, a taxpayer, and potentially a future parent. So when people continuously move toward one region, economic activity follows them. And that creates a problem for the places they're leaving behind. Because the opposite process can happen there. A town loses young workers. The local population gets older. A store loses customers. A business owner finds it harder to hire. A school has fewer children. A bus route becomes harder to justify. A clinic has fewer people nearby to support it. And now something dangerous happens. The town becomes less attractive to the next generation. So even more young people leave. It's a feedback loop. Fewer people. Less economic activity. Fewer opportunities. More reasons to leave. This is the part of the story that makes the relocation policy make sense. Japan's population decline isn't evenly distributed. Preliminary 2025 census results showed population declines in 158 of Japan's 1,719 municipalities. That's roughly 9 out of every 10 municipalities. Meanwhile, Tokyo continues to attract people. So Japan has a strange geographic problem. It's not simply that there are fewer people. It's that the people who remain are not distributed evenly. One part of the country becomes increasingly concentrated. Other parts become increasingly difficult to sustain. Imagine a small town with 10,000 people. Now imagine that the youngest 2,000 gradually leave over several decades. The town doesn't just lose 2,000 people. It loses thousands of potential workers, thousands of customers, future parents, future business owners, future taxpayers. The effect compounds. And eventually the question isn't, how do we get people to visit this town? It's, how do we get people to build their lives here? That's a much harder problem. So Japan tries something unusual. The country has a regional relocation support framework designed to encourage eligible people connected to Tokyo to move to participating regional areas. The national framework covers people such as those living in Tokyo's 23 wards, as well as certain people living in the broader Tokyo area who commute to the wards. But there's an important detail. This isn't a universal government check for anyone who wants to leave Tokyo. The person has to meet eligibility requirements. Depending on the program, the move can be connected to employment, telework, entrepreneurship, or other qualifying circumstances. And local governments can have different implementation details and additional incentives. At the national framework level, the headline support can reach 1 million yen for a qualifying household, and up to another 1 million yen for each accompanying child under 18. For a qualifying family with 2 children, that can mean as much as 3 million yen. That's a serious incentive. But here's the important part. The money isn't really the objective. The objective is what happens after the family arrives. You can't simply take the money and disappear. The relocation program is built around eligibility requirements. Applicants have to satisfy conditions concerning where they lived or worked, where they're moving, and what they're going to do there. And in many cases, the move is expected to become a long-term commitment rather than a temporary trip. Under the national framework, recipients generally need to intend to remain in the destination municipality for at least 5 years. That tells us something important. The government isn't trying to buy a vacation. It's trying to influence a permanent economic decision. And that changes the calculation completely. Because moving isn't just about the cost of hiring a truck. Imagine Kenji again. Suppose someone offers him several million yen to move away from Tokyo. Sounds great. But then he asks, where will I work? Will my salary be lower? What happens to my partner's job? Where will my children go to school? What happens to my career? How far away are hospitals? What happens to the professional network I've spent years building? The government can subsidize the move. It can't easily subsidize everything that makes Tokyo attractive. And that is the real conflict. On paper, several million yen sounds enormous. But moving isn't just a financial transaction. It's a career decision, a family decision, and potentially a decision about the next 20 years of your life. Imagine Kenji sitting at his kitchen table. He has the relocation offer in front of him. But now he has to calculate the invisible costs. Maybe the regional town has cheaper housing. That's a real benefit. But what if the job pays less? What if his partner has fewer career opportunities? What if changing jobs becomes harder? What if the children have fewer educational options? What if the family's professional network disappears? And what if they eventually want to return to Tokyo? Suddenly, the relocation payment looks different. Because the government is paying for the move. But Kenji is paying the opportunity cost. And that's the key economic question. How much money would it actually take to convince someone to trade opportunity for affordability? Because if a person moves to a cheaper town but loses 1 million yen a year in income, the relocation payment doesn't solve much. If a business owner can't find customers, a cheaper storefront doesn't solve the problem. The money only works if something else changes too. This creates an unusual economic tug-of-war. On one side you have Tokyo. Jobs. Universities. Companies. Transportation. Culture. Professional networks. Convenience. Opportunity. On the other side you have regional Japan. More space. Potentially lower housing costs. Smaller communities. Local incentives. And something else. A desperate need for people. Tokyo doesn't necessarily need to convince people to come. The economic system does that automatically. A graduate sees better career prospects. A worker sees more employers. A business sees more customers. And people follow those incentives. Regional governments face the opposite problem. They're effectively saying, "Please come here." And that's why the relocation payment exists. It's an attempt to counterbalance the much larger economic forces pulling people toward Tokyo. But that raises a difficult question. How much money would it actually take to convince someone to trade opportunity for affordability? Because if the economic opportunity doesn't follow the person, the subsidy may only change their address. It doesn't necessarily change their future. And that's the real problem Japan is trying to solve. This is where Japan's policy becomes much more interesting. The government isn't really betting on one family. It's betting on what happens after the family arrives. Imagine a family moves into a regional town. They rent or buy a home. They buy groceries. They eat at local restaurants. Their children attend school. They use transportation. They visit doctors. Maybe one parent starts a business. That business hires someone. That worker spends money locally. Another business gets more customers. A school has enough students to remain open. A town becomes slightly more attractive. And suddenly, the original family isn't just a recipient of government money. They're part of an economic loop. People create demand. Demand supports businesses. Businesses create jobs. Jobs attract people. People support schools and services. And those services make the town more attractive to the next family. That's the dream. But there's another possible outcome. The family moves. The job market doesn't improve. The local businesses remain weak. Services continue shrinking. The family eventually leaves. In that case, the government has paid for movement without creating a self-sustaining economy. And that's the real risk. So perhaps Japan isn't really trying to move people. It's trying to move economic opportunity. That's much harder. Because people don't usually choose where to live based on population statistics. They choose based on life. Where can I find a job? Where can I afford a home? Where can my children go to school? Where are my friends? Where can I build a career? Where can I imagine my future? That's why the Tokyo problem is so difficult. Tokyo can be incredibly attractive even while being expensive. And a regional town can be affordable while still struggling to attract people. Those two things can exist at the same time. Tokyo doesn't have to be failing for regional Japan to be struggling. In fact, the paradox is almost the opposite. Tokyo's success makes the regional problem harder. The better Tokyo concentrates companies, jobs, and opportunities, the stronger its economic gravity becomes. And the stronger that gravity becomes, the harder it is to convince people to move in the opposite direction. So, is the money enough? That brings us back to the original offer. Millions of yen to move away from Tokyo sounds enormous. But compared with a lifetime of income, career opportunities, and social connections, it may not be enormous at all. That's the economic experiment Japan is running. Can a relatively small financial incentive change a much larger decision? Can one family's relocation create enough economic activity to attract another family? Can a town that has been losing people for decades create a reason for people to stay? And can government money change something that markets have been pushing in the opposite direction for years? There is no simple answer. Because the subsidy isn't really buying a house. It isn't really buying a moving truck. And it isn't really buying a few years of population growth. It's trying to buy something much more valuable. Momentum. People create demand. Demand supports businesses. Businesses create jobs. Jobs attract people. And if that cycle begins working again, the subsidy becomes more than a payment. It becomes the first piece of a new economic cycle. But if the opportunity doesn't follow the people, the money may only move the problem. And this brings us back to the strangest part of the story. Japan is paying people to leave Tokyo. But Tokyo is still attracting people. That's not a contradiction once you understand the economics. The government sees a country where population is shrinking and increasingly concentrating in one metropolitan area. Individuals see something different. They see opportunity. Both sides can be rational. The government wants regional economies to survive. Individuals want the best future they can build. The government sees the map. The individual sees the next 20 years of their life. And that's why this isn't really a story about whether Japan should pay people to move. It's a story about whether money can overcome economic gravity. Because you can pay someone to move. You can help pay for the truck. You can subsidize the relocation. But you can't simply pay someone to want to build their future somewhere. For that, you need jobs. You need businesses. You need schools. You need services. You need opportunity. And ultimately, you need a reason to stay. So here's the question. If Japan offered you several million yen to leave Tokyo, but you had to rebuild your career and your family's future somewhere else, would you take the deal?